Hello and welcome to Giants Spotlight. Thank you for listening wherever you get your podcast today. We're going to talk about the Giants. They dropped 3 of 4 to the Dodgers, and it does not look good for them, especially in terms of the wild card race. It's looking pretty much like they're out. Conforto is expected to opt out of the deal, as we might have expected, but also didn't expect at the same time. We said he would probably opt into the deal, but I forgot that he is a Scott Boras client. And finally, there is expected to be changes within the Giants pitching staff. There is so much to get to today, so we're going to dive into it right now. We're going to start with the Dodgers games, though, because that was an interesting series. You know, they dropped the first game, and it wasn't that great. It was like 7-2, and they go in the second game, and they win 5-1. And, you know, then they lose the next game, I think about 7-0, if I remember. And the last game, they lost 2-3. And, I mean, not fun, especially because that game is the one that they were walked off on. It's not fun to see your team get walked off, and they could have had that. They definitely could have won that game. I'm not saying that I expect them to beat this really good Dodgers team that has been good for a while, but you know, in this position they're in, it's tough to watch them play because of the fact that they have endured some really troubling times, and they were in the wild card at one point. Now they're out, and it's looking like the season is done and there is no postseason opportunity. With that said, dropping 3 of 4 to the Dodgers was not as ideal as you would need it to be, considering that, you know, they're under 500 right now. And splitting the series would have been a lot better, especially just for all of the fans around. It's not good to see your team lose to your rivals. It's not what you want. But, you know, Beck did really good in the road finale, and it was pretty good to see. And I think overall, there's a lot of youth that are going to be contributing for years. And it was good to see that because the youth movement really was in full effect at Dodger Stadium. I mean, you had Luciano back. I'm just going to read up one of the lineups because that really demonstrates the youth in the team that was available during these games. I mean, you had Sable out there, you had Fitzgerald in center field, you had Luciano at shortstop, you had Patrick Bailey catching as well. You had Heliot Ramos who was called up, especially after some injuries happened. You had Matos. I mean, I'm thinking of all the people right now. These are all the young guys that you want to see up and that you expect to play well into the future. And, I mean, they need the experience. And I think at this point, I feel like the Giants team has given up because they've come to the realization that possibly what is going on is not working. It's not available to them. And now, they call up all of the youth, and it's not what you would do if you were in a postseason push. You wouldn't call up all of the young guys, the inexperienced guys. So I think in them doing that, it's good to see that they're looking to the future still, and they're still turning to these guys, and they're going to trust them in the, for the franchise years to come. But it's also showing me that, they are not in that race still, and I think the front office has seen that they are not going to make it into the postseason, which is another upset for Giants fans where we had very high hopes coming out of 2021 after a 107-win season, and here we come back to, 500. It's 81. We missed the playoffs, and now we're missing the playoffs possibly again. I say possibly because we haven't officially been ruled out yet, but from what it looks like and from the way the front office has been treating it, we are out. And that is tough. That is not what we want to see for this team, but there's a lot of news to come with it, and I think that's what we're going to get to because Conforto, who is a free agent at the end of this year, has been said that they expect him to opt out of the deal. So he had a player option that would give him guaranteed money if he was to opt into it to come back to the Giants. And, I mean, what's tough is that he was probably a more solid contributor in the year. He did get injured, and he wasn't the player we expected him to play like. He wasn't the 20, 30 home run guy that he was with the New York Mets. But right here, I mean, we didn't get the best out of Michael Conforto, but we didn't get the worst. And Michael Conforto didn't have his best season. I think he was expecting to have a really good season so he can move into the playoffs move into the offseason and get a big deal. He's a Scott Boras client, which means Scott Boras is his agent. He oftentimes gets these big money deals for his clients. And just for reference, Scott Boras is the client for Carlos Correa as well. And Carlos Correa made out with a bag as well, even with the injury that they've talked about. And, he didn't perform as he probably should have this year too. So it wasn't the worst. It wasn't the worst thing to happen for fans, but it was pretty disappointing in the moment. But yeah, Conforto is a Scott Boras client, which means that he's probably going to go off into free agency and get a ton of money. for not much production in this last year, which I could definitely see happening for some team who's willing to take a chance on him or just willing to take him to possibly get him back to the way he was. But I think the Giants are just going to move on. I don't think they're going to try to, reach out to him because I think they're willing to let their chances go with the younger guys. And with a lot of the younger guys, you have a lot of outfielders coming up. The outfield was a big crowded piece in this year. We had a lot of people out there. Like you had Slater, you had Yastrzemski, you had Conforto, you had Haniger at one point. Matos got called up in place, and it was just there were a lot of people out there. So a lot of the young guys who usually play in the outfield probably wouldn't get that shot. And I'm talking about Heliot Ramos. He doesn't get really much of a fair shot coming up. And that's for a little bit of different reasons at times, but they did have Fitzgerald play center field. And Fitzgerald also got his first home run in this Dodgers homestand. And I think Fitzgerald is Dodgers homestand against the Giants. I don't know why I phrased it like that. But anyways, Fitzgerald got his first MLB home run. And that's always good to see. You love to see the young guys come up and perform. Fitzgerald is a guy I was really expecting to be up sooner. He was in the 2020 club in AAA. He was crushing the ball. He was doing really well. He was doing all the great things, but he never got called up because, there were some crowded spots. And he usually plays in the middle infield, but he's a utility guy. He can move around the field. He can be in the outfield. He can be in the mid, you can put him at shortstop, second base. You can do what you want, but Luciano is here, and he's been hitting as well. He's been hitting as he's come up, and it's the guy that the Giants are really going to start trusting with that shortstop position because Crawford, and this is another sad thing, we've missed a lot here on Giants Spotlight. I deeply apologize, but you know what? We're back. We're asking for forgiveness from you fans. But anyways, Crawford got injured, and it sucks to see that because it's looking like it's going to be his last game. I mean, his last game was played, so it's looking like he's not going to be back in time. And if the Giants aren't going to make the postseason, then it's looking like it's his last game was played there, and that's a little bit tough. It's tough to see a send off like that where it was a frustrating season, and a veteran key player for the Giants franchise who won some World Series and made some postseason runs with him is now getting that send off in a way that Giants fans probably don't like to see. And I mean, I don't like to see it. I'm pretty sure a lot of other people don't, but it's just how it's going to happen because you're going to have to start running with these younger guys sooner or later. And Luciano looks like he's at the point where he's able to come up, and I don't think they're going to waste their time with anybody else, anybody older in that shortstop position. And that's just my personal take, but it's sad to see Crawford send off like that. And you know what? It's okay because he was a very good piece for this Giants team, and we'll talk more about that another time. But this is important because we here had talked about what is going wrong in the Giants front office to lead to these disappointing teams, to these disappointing outcomes for the fans. Ever since 2021, it has not been the same. 2021 was a very magical season. Everything went right from pitching to hitting to defense to all of it. And it's kind of fallen apart. So we've been wondering, why is that the case? And I think that's a big thing we got to discuss here because I have an article pulled up. It's directly from the Giants page on MLB, and I think this is going to be another coaching change. That the title of the article is "Changes Underway for Giants Coaching Staff," and I think it's not in the terms that we were liking to see it. I would say it's because Brian Bannister, who is he's one of the members of the pitching staff, and he was an advisor for the pitching staff. Eventually went and he got a deal for the White Sox. So he's headed to the White Sox. So he served as the director of pitching since 2019. And I'll admit, he's done some pretty good work over here. A lot of pitchers have started coming to San Francisco because it has been very attractive to the pitching market. I mean, you have Carlos Rodon, who came in and had a Cy Young-like season. He was a contender for sure, and he did really well. You had Logan Webb emerge as an ace. You had Alex Cobb regain his stuff and start pitching like an all-star. And you had Kevin Gausman as well come up and just become like an ace out of nowhere. These guys that you grab from, they're not big-name people, but you bring them in, and they start doing a lot of work for you. And they get it done, and they have good stats. And so there is pitching hopes for the Giants when these pitchers come over. But with Brian Bannister now gone, the Giants are going to look for someone to fill that role. And it's going to get a lot of people thinking because this guy is the think tank, as Cobb says, behind a lot of the success for the pitching staff. So they're going to have to bring somebody in who's going to be able to do what they want and get that same production from people that you don't expect to get production from. So, prime example is Kevin Gausman came in, and nobody had really, thought of Kevin Gausman as a big name pitcher who's got big league stuff, Cy Young contender. Nobody thought of him as that because he wasn't that. He just wasn't that guy. And he comes over into San Francisco, and things turn around. And in his second year in San Francisco, he's a Cy Young contender and is one of the strikeout leaders in the NL. So you see that. You see Webb come up and be a very big working pitcher for the Giants. He's someone who gets it done, goes out there, does the work, and gets the Giants the win ultimately. You had people like DeSclafani. Although this is a bit of a different situation, DeSclafani had an injury that didn't allow him to produce in 2022 and 2023 like we would have liked him to. And in fact, he struggled in 2021. He did really well for the team and gave them a lot of production. Alex Cobb, he made his first ever All-Star appearance with the Giants, and he had a long career before that, but they picked him up because they saw something in him. So Brian Bannister was a guy, once again, that's been a big part of the success for certain areas of this Giants team, and to see him go away is going to be a tough one. But if the Giants can pick someone up who's going to be that kind of guy again, I think it would be a good pickup. And I mean, obviously, I think I'd like to see some changes for the offense for the Giants, and that's another thing that we're about to talk about right now, because the not only pitching staff, we're also going to be talking about batting. And so it's not people in the hitting staff that we're going to be discussing, but there is acknowledgement of something that I think a lot of fans knew before the front office knew, or at least refused to admit, because the front office had been working with a platoon system where the lineup changed every day. And we had known that that has not been working for the past year, 2 years. It hasn't been working like it should, like it did in 2021. It just hasn't. And even in 2021, you had people who played almost every day, such as Crawford or Posey or Belt when they were in. And these guys were hot, and they would play pretty much every day. But after that, you didn't have that same approach. So what happened was your whole lineup was changing. It wasn't just the 1 through 3 that was staying the same. No, every part of the lineup was changing, and that led to a lot of problems for the offense because you don't get a continuous lineup that's going to help you win the game. So according to Andrew Baggerly of The Athletic, he reports this. So there is growing acknowledgement within the Giants organization that they want to create lineup continuity this offseason. But with a thin top of the free agent class with Ohtani, Bellinger, and Chapman, the Giants could be willing to trade some of their top pitching prospects in order to bring in some strong batters. And that makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot to talk about and dissect there, because you have very good pitching prospects within the Giants system. You have Carson Weisenhunt, who is a top 100 prospect who looks very, very good. You have Kyle Harrison, who's been coming up, and you have other people like Tristan Beck and Keaton Wynn and Mason Black, who is down in AAA. I think he might be in AA. Don't quote me on that, but he is in the Giants system, and he's been a very good pitcher. So you have all of that. That's what we have to discuss, is they're willing to trade some of these guys to be able to get a big impact bat for their lineup, to get continuous lineup. So I think people that they would be looking at in the scenario for this offseason is going to be people like Pete Alonso. The Mets have disclosed that they are willing to trade Pete Alonso, and I think that is an excellent decision, because if the Giants could get a person like Alonso who gives, a lot of production, 30-40 home run seasons, 100-plus RBIs, he is a solid offensive contributor. He's got a big bat. He's also a good first baseman and could add a lot of value to this Giants team. That is a guy that I think they would be talking about for at least trade-wise. There's been other names, like they threw out Lars Nootbaar or Jordan Walker. There's other people that they threw out there, but I think those are the main ones. Oh, Matt McClain. I think people like that, those are like some mock kind of trades, but I think you get the point. I think they finally are admitting, and that there's growing acknowledgement within the front office that they can't keep doing it the way they've been doing it because it's not working. And, finally, sooner or later, that had to be the case. And I think now that they finally realize that they can bring it all together, and if they can get some people who are going to be like solid contributors for the lineup each and every day, you're going to see a lot better offense from this team, where they can fill in people at the lower half of the lineup, and you know what, maybe even some of the rookies become everyday contributors, and now you have a very continuous lineup. So I think that's the ultimate goal for this Giants team, but we got to see it happen first. You know, they tell us a lot. They tell us that they're going to get these big name players, they're going to do all these things, but we have to see it first. I'll believe it when I see it. Thank you for listening to Giant Spotlight wherever you get your podcast. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.